Hi guys, my name is Jewel and I want you to close your eyes because I'm finna take you back. I hope your eyes are closed because I'm not playing with you. Close your eyes. Imagine it's Fashion Week. They're showing fall 2023 and JACQUEMUS finally drops his collection and then something catches your eye. The shoes these models have on are real cute and you ain't never seen nothing like that before. Then fast forward to actual fall 23 when these shoes come out and you see them online and you fall in love again until you see the price and they're $690. So today we're going to be making those $690 shoes at home because girl, we got JACQUEMUS at home. Let's go. All right, so we started off strong using some milliput, and this was my first time using it, and I actually really liked it for molding my last. So I cut out my two pieces and then molded them together until they were one color and started adding it onto my last to begin to make that really crispy JACQUEMUS square toe, honey. And I slowly was just building it up and doing it by eye and trying to make sure they were even. After letting it dry overnight, I sanded everything down to make sure it was just extremely crisp and very square, exactly how I wanted it to be, as well as smooth to the touch, and there wasn't many bumps between the last and the milliput. Then I started actually taping out my last to make my pattern, and girl, I'm taping, then the dang on camera died, so I added a little animation for you. So I taped out the whole last, I added in my style lines, cut it out with an X-Acto knife, and then I used that to make my paper pattern after adding seam allowance. So then we moved on to actually making my insoles. I started out with textile board and just tracing over that little pattern that I had made of the sole of the shoe. And girl, you know it got serious when I was pulling out the electric cutters because them scissors just wasn't cutting it. So then I took that and I put it on some foam and traced out that same textile board and added it on top, as you can see. Then I also used some cork between the textile board and the foam just to make sure it was really bouncy and springy and very comfortable on the foot. I went in with my extra strength glue and glued the textile board onto the cork, making sure that there are glue on both sides because this glue sticks to itself rather than sticking to another material. I did the same thing with the foam onto the cork, so I added my glue, put them on both sides, and then stuck them together. Now we are ready to start actually adding on the leather to these insoles. So I took my leather cement glue and added it onto the insoles on the foam side as well as the leather where they would stick together. And this really stuck together because leather cement is going to get the job done, honey. So then I made sure I had a lot of seam allowance on my leather portion because I knew I was going to have to last it down to the insole board, and I was making my insole just a little bitty chunky. So I went around, added glue to the edges of both the insole and to the leather, smoothed everything out with my little glue spatula, and then started lasting it down. I made a lot of snips in those curves to make sure that everything was really straight and clean and didn't have a bunch of puckers. Then I cut off any excess as well as skiving it away. And girl, look at those beautiful red insoles, honey. Those are cute. And so now we're actually going on to making the uppers. So with my pattern piece, I put some snips around the curve where it will connect to basically like the toe tap of this section. I clipped it all down and then took it to my sewing machine. And this was a little challenging to get around that curve, but the snips absolutely help. Then I added glue to both the inside and the outside of that seam and glued all of my leather down at those snips. I wanted to make sure that this was really flat once you turn it inside out because you would see the good side of the fabric, whether it was on the inside of the shoe or the outside of the shoe. And it came out really clean. Then I started working on the strips that would become my bows. So I cut out like a 1/2 inch by maybe 12-inch strips of leather, and I added glue to the inside and then folded them in half and really pressed them down until they were nice and flat. So once I had those done, I took them to my sewing machine. I sewed them at like maybe a 1/4 inch allowance and then cut off the excess. So I made sure to sew right on the edge so my little strips would be nice and cute. And look at my bows. So right now my uppers are done. My little bows are on them and they look so cute. Originally I thought I was just going to be able to tie a knot and make the bow like you would tie your shoes, but the knot was so chunky that I was like, oh, it was not looking good. So I ended up just sewing the bows in, and I don't think looks too bad. So these are done. We're gonna start actually putting everything together. So I'm gonna sew the lining of the shoe onto the uppers, and then we're gonna start gluing things down and then start lasting. And that's exactly what we did. So I took my lining pieces and my upper pieces, I pinned them together. We'll clip them together because you can't pin leather, but I did it at that top line seam and then sewed it down. I'm not loving the direction of the shoe right now. It doesn't look terrible. It does not look terrible, but it's not how I wanted it. So right now, because I had to open up this seam right here, the way that this is just so bulky and chunky, I do not like that. Then this would have to fold under and be glued down and then possibly be top stitched. And since I have a regular sewing machine, it's not gonna look as clean. And I don't know, I just don't like that. I know that I'm going to start over. I'm gonna start over, and I think I might change the design a little bit. I'm also thinking that I might make these into a mule so they are more like the JACQUEMUS original. So yeah, let's start over. And with that, we were back to the drawing board. So I wanted to keep this in because I wanted to show you a real life example of what it looks like to actually tape out my last and make my pattern. After I did that, I took my pattern and I brought it over to my leather, tracing it out on the back side and then cutting it out. Then we moved on to actually constructing the uppers. So I matched up the back seam, which would be at your heel, and then I clipped those together and took them over to my machine and sewed them down, as you can see with my cutie little line. Then I added glue to both sides of that seam and pasted those extra flaps, which was my seam allowance, down on itself so it could be really smooth and really flat at that back heel, as you can see. I then went away and skived the rest off to make sure it was smooth to the touch, and I reduced all that bulk that would then be coming into this seam that I'm making right now. So I went around and I clipped the top line of my shoe and went to the sewing machine and sewed that down. Once everything was nice and sewn, as you can see, I went around and I added clips to all the curves of the shoe and then added glue to that side of the seam. What I did was fold over all of those curves to make sure I had a really nice top line. This is how I like to do mine. There are a lot of methods to do it, but I feel like all of the others, you have to like cut away leather in a really precise way, and I don't like that. I just wanted to look good. So I smoothed out my top line with a hammer, and with that, our uppers were done and smooth. So it was time to actually start lasting these bad boys on. So after attaching my insole to my shoe last, and I taped this wrong, you're supposed to do the opposite way. If like you're doing this at home, do that. And then I marked the back of where that heel should sit. Since this was a mule now, I wanted to make sure I got it precisely where it needed to be and then tape that down. So then we actually started lasting our shoe together. So I added my non-toxic glue to the textile board side of my insole, as well as to the inside of my leather. So this is on the good side of my lining. I added that glue, and then I pressed those two parts together, so the textile board to my lining, and I did it really slightly to make sure that there were no ripples or bubbles, and look how beautiful she looks. So then I started heating up my heel tab so I can start putting it on and making sure it was nice and stiff, as you can see. Now, I will say that at this point, I got a little frustrated and I ran out of camera battery and I think space on my SD card. So we're gonna go back to a previous shoemaking video and look at the remaining steps of what needs to happen. Alrighty, so I also heated up the toe stiffener, and I just put that on the front of my shoe. Since I had a square toe, I made sure to make it really crisp and straight. Then I again went in, added glue to my last and added glue to my leather and stuck that together. Now the way that I did these soles was different than how I did those soles in the video, so I'm linking this I Can Make Shoes video down in the description on exactly how I made it, and I just used rubber resin soling instead of leather. So definitely check that out if you're interested in doing it the same way. Time for the reveal, girls!
Popping up to what I'm supposed to. Don't like conversating, I can't hold you. Don't shit to the script, I follow no rules. That's how the coast do. Yeah, that the speakers when I roll through. I don't hang around long. I've been about my business, I've been working till the moon.